Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. It's better than Darfur, Sudan. Trust me. The water here tastes like water. It's very nice. I guess I'm going to start out hard and heavy. This is in this advertisement is in the magazine which you've been provided with, and I just want to say one thing about it. This is against humanitarian principles as we know them today and decided. So this should be pretty interesting discussions for later. But I wanted to bring that up. There's not a day that goes by sitting in my office at Interaction that I do not get a phone call from a private security company asking me about NGO security. And I think the separation between the two will continue as long as there's a lack of understanding on both sides of how people operate. Now that I've said that, I have worked for a private security company before. A little about myself. You know, I started going to college, played football, and got a degree from that. I went to college, I didn't go to class. What I mean by that is I had no idea what I was going to do. I had a huge missions background as a kid growing up, and I saw the senseless murders and kidnappings of humanitarians around the world, and that's what kind of motivated me to use my career to springboard into humanitarian work. I kind of break the mold when it comes to humanitarian security. Most of the people that are out there who are in the position of humanitarian security officers do not have a military or police background. Usually they're coming from a logistics background. Numbers out there, humanitarian security, solely their responsibility, that their TOR specifically says that they are responsible for security is, I would say, maybe 20 in the United States, totally. Mostly it's a second hat for somebody else to be working with. Trevor and I work very close together. I deal with about 170 organizations through Interaction, and through that we've, over the past 10 years, come up with what we call the minimum operating security standards, which we implore. Now, one of the things from this, it's kind of groundbreaking because now there's standards that can be set through the community, meaning every organization that is with Interaction must apply what we have come up with by the end of year 2008. What I think you will see from this is a lot more litigation, unfortunately, because now 170 organizations said there's a minimum for duty of care as they send their people out through the world. And we'll talk a little bit about that. There are some lawsuits starting to spring up around the world when it comes to overseas incidents of organizations no longer providing enough care. One of the largest lawsuits, which is kind of sealed, as most of them are, and if you do your LexisNexis search, you'll find it's almost impossible to find NGO organizations that have been sued successfully. But one was due to lack of care for a post-traumatic stress disorder after a person came back. And this is one of the things that which are not in my notes, but I think since I've talked about it, better follow up on that. There's three things which are important for your people when you send them out. Number one is, do they understand the environment they're going into? As you send people into this, NGOs alike, we have to make sure we paint a picture as much as ground truth as we possibly can before we hire people to send them out there. The second thing an organization has to do is, while the people are in the field, they must provide them the support to deal with some of the things that they're dealing with, especially the smells, the sights, and the violent occurrences that they'll be exposed to. And the third thing is the aftercare. What kind of care are you giving these people after they come back? Even when they no longer work for your organization, does your organization have inside of it responsibilities built in to take care of these people based upon what they've experienced abroad? I'll tell you straight out, I go to counseling for some of the things that I've seen. And especially when it's an aid worker who goes to try to help someone. And then upon that, they come back and they can't deal with the things that they've witnessed. So that's a very difficult situation that we deal with. And we're trying to work on standards on that. Currently, Interaction has funded successfully, in Darfur, Sudan specifically, some methodologies to start working in that environment for the people that are out there aiding the people. On page 13 of the same magazine that I showed you earlier, there's an article which was published, and I wrote it, And it's concerning three components of security: acceptance, deterrence, and protection. I'm not going to go through it. I'm not going to insult your intelligence. I know you can read. So if you read through it, you'll get a little bit more in depth of what I want to talk about today. But already I'm thinking on a new model. That's an older model which has been around since about 1999 on the way NGOs do security. The military calls acceptance hearts and minds, how to win the hearts and minds of the people. And in the NGO world, we call that how do we build acceptance. Unfortunately, I believe there's probably 5 steps of acceptance and levels of acceptance. You can't be brand new into a country, never been there before, and the people will accept you because you're foreign to them. There's just too much culture differences between the two. So there are some mitigating strategies as you build into that you might build up to levels of acceptance once you've been in an area for so long. I think one of the things which I'd like to do is to change that model into adding one more component called avoidance. There are just too many examples of NGOs working in the world where they'll have to relocate out of an area because of situations which have occurred. And at that point, avoidance is a security component to avoid the threat altogether. From that, I think it's really important that they have to build levels of what security might be. The UN uses a phase system. They have 5 phases. One which is not a phase is what they call a 0 phase, which means everything is all green, good to go. I think we would have that in most places. Chicago on the south side, I wouldn't think is necessarily a green phase. But it's definitely depending upon where you live and your context of how you're operating. But in order to actually measure what phases are, you have to have at least a program assessment, a risk assessment, and a vulnerability assessment. These are some of the things I think NGOs are really lacking in today, and that's one of the missions I'll be doing over the next 2 years, is to try to develop standard terminology between the 170 NGOs on what levels of risk might be, and at least the terminology and descriptor. I heard somebody say earlier, you just shouldn't have went there, it's just too dangerous to go. The NGOs are we are moving to a system which is similar to the United Nations that as a security officer, I don't make that call. I will never say, no, you can't go. Because my program assessment is, number one, to provide needs for the people. If I say, no, you can't go there, I need to be able to back that up. And I can't back that up. My job is to advise only. I will advise them on what's it going to take for them to accomplish that mission. So my answer isn't no. My answer will always be yes. You can always accomplish your mission, but here's the mitigation that you're going to have to do in order to accomplish that. And if an organization is willing to accept that risk, then they're willing to accept the mitigation that's cost to go in there. So the answer should always be yes when it comes from the NGO perspective. My job is to coordinate the security throughout the world for the NGOs. It's a very difficult task. And over the last almost 17 years I've been doing this, I found out there's really 2 components of security coordination which are more important than anything else. The first component is, number 1, personality. More than anything else. You have to have an individual who's coordinating like we have in Afghanistan, like the security coordination we're working on in Darfur right now, like we have in Somalia, that the number 1 driver is the ability for an individual to maintain relationships with local people, with local government, maintain relationships cross-border, when I say cross-border, I mean with the military, maintain relationships among other NGOs. You have to wear many hats simultaneously. You have to be able to give information as well as get information in order to keep painting the picture of what the threats are, because they change daily. One of the questions when I do some training, when I talk about the difference in phases of security, I ask, do you know what the difference is between a phase 1 security level and maybe a phase 5? 1 being the least dangerous, level 5 being the most dangerous. The difference is, and what I say in my presentations is 5 minutes. It could be 5 minutes. So our training for NGOs is turning into from just reaction, which is very important, but it's also important to be able to anticipate. And that's what your program assessment does. That's what your threat assessment does. And that's what your vulnerability assessment does. You have to understand the context of what you're working in. And you have to be able to anticipate what that's going to be. So on a day-to-day, you're always reevaluating.